I'm Maria Lopez-Nuñez, representing Ironbound Community Corporation. At ICC, I am the head of organizing and advocacy. How is our community and organization being impacted and responding to the COVID-19 crisis? So the COVID-19 crisis has deeply impacted our neighborhood in the Ironbound. Our neighborhood's mostly made up of undocumented people who were extremely vulnerable before this pandemic hit, and now are being deeply impacted. Many have lost their jobs. They lived on a check by check, cash day in and day out basis, and have been receiving no public assistance. So it's been over 100 days for so many families without any state help, city help, or federal help. We also have, we've been impacted by industry who have continued to pollute in our neighborhood despite the pandemic. We're facing threats of eviction by a lot of unscrupulous landlords who don't care that there's a pandemic or an eviction moratorium happening, and are just threatening people because it seems like, unfortunately, our society is fueled by greed and has not been showing compassion or care for its most vulnerable residents. And in New Jersey, undocumented people have actually paid in $1 billion in income taxes and unemployment payments, and are not receiving 1 cent. What lessons are we seeing here that we can apply to the climate crisis? Well, I feel like COVID-19 has exposed the deep intersectionality of all our issues, whether it be, air pollution and how that disproportionately leads to death due to COVID in Black and Brown communities. COVID-19 is giving us a chance to really reflect on so many deep inequalities that it's brought to the surface. And so I'm hoping that as we tackle the climate crisis, because it's not just COVID, right? Like, we're facing the pandemic of racism, of police brutality, of housing insecurity, of healthcare. And if we're gonna really tackle the climate crisis in a way that's fair and equitable, that puts communities that are the most impacted first, we're gonna have to learn to hold all those complexities and fight for solutions that address them all and stop thinking so small. We need to think bigger because the problems we're facing are bigger. We have not in our generation seen a pandemic of this scale, but I'm sure in my bones that it's not gonna be the last one our generation will see. So hopefully we're gonna start opening our hearts and our vision, be more visionary, be bolder in our solutions to climate change, and recognize that those solutions cannot be disconnected from people's lived realities and all the other things that they need help with. So I'm always saying, like, let's stop with the, reusable bags, and encouraging people to do that. And let's start really getting involved, civic participation, not just at ICC, but I'm sure every community group and folks who are trying to make change need people to show up with their bodies. We saw the impacts of people showing up to protests and the amount of gains that Black Lives Matter has been able to make. We need that for all our struggles. We need people to actually show up and put their bodies on the line, show up to hearings, call the people who are elected, hold them accountable. That's what I think it means by, like, raising our voices. We actually need to show up and put the time in to change the society to reflect, a regenerative economy that we need to see. We can't keep exploiting our communities and exploiting the most vulnerable. We're hoping that this health crisis does not become a housing crisis. We're hoping that this health crisis doesn't advance a climate denier agenda, that this does not, we saw what the EPA did with rollbacks. We've seen what state governments have done with thinking that because we're in the pandemic, we need to stop all the protections that we have for our communities. So I actually think this is time to double down and to make sure that we are focusing on the most vulnerable communities, putting them up front so that they lead us out of this. Clearly, what we've been doing is not working. It's just exaggerating the inequalities that already exist. So in order to reverse that, we need to shift power and shift power back into our communities so that we can make change from the bottom up.